Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding and Conflict. And I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And I'm really excited today to welcome to the show Joseph Zweben. Joe is a Pace University student who has excelled both academically and athletically, having earned recognition in 3 prestigious honor societies during his time in high school. But he's here today as the winner of the Child of Divorce or Single Parent Household Scholarship, where his essay stood out among numerous applicants because, Joe, and one, what you really talked about as how well your parents did during the divorce process and how important and impactful that was for you. And so, can you just talk a little bit generally about what you think was the overall impact of them working together to try to figure out a way to parent you? Like, how did that help you?
I think it kind of gave me a lesser like it was kind of easier for me to adapt and understand like what was happening because it happened to me when I was really young. I'd say like third or fourth grade, I think. So I was pretty young when it all happened. I also have a younger brother. So dealing with that and trying to be the big brother with him when my parents were going through that, it was kind of hard, but they made it a little easier because it wasn't like I know when some parents get divorced, they have like physical problems, emotional problems, yell at each other, fight with each other. But my parents weren't really like that. They were kind of understanding, understood how me and my brother were so little at the time and kind of understood how it would have an effect on us and didn't really, or at least didn't fight or have problems in front of us and kind of just kept it to themselves at least. So me and my brother didn't really have to deal with that extra stress on top of adapting to, having two houses, not having parents be together anymore and that type of stuff.
Yeah. Can you think of a specific moment that really exemplifies their co-parenting approach?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm a college student now, so it doesn't happen as much anymore. But I mean, throughout middle school and high school with my brother, like whenever we go from like my dad's house to my mom's house, I wouldn't have to be like afraid of like, oh, are they gonna argue right now? Like it was just like, they come into each other's houses. It's not like you're not allowed this, you're not allowed to do that. They don't really set boundaries for each other. And like when we have holidays, for example, they're always at the holidays. It's not like they're not allowed. They're like shunned away from each other's families. Like they're still a part of the holidays and part of the family. So it's not like I don't know, it's not like I'm saying they're not like, mean to each other, stuff like that. It's good like that.
That's really great that they didn't put you in the middle. That's what it sounds like, that they really figured out
Yeah,
whatever
it
they
didn't make
needed.
me like make a decision about like who I want to be with, for example. They were just there together, so it didn't really create a problem for me.
Well, Joe, let's talk a little bit about that because I think that some parents think that, particularly as kids get older into high school, they have a driver's license, or they can go back and forth on their own, that giving them the choice as to where they want to be is good for them. But it sounds like what you're basically saying is to have that decision made for you means I'm putting this, tell me if this is right. It's like your parents are cool with it. It's mom's Christmas, dad's cool with it. It's dad's Thanksgiving, mom's good with it. Like that they agree. Is that right?
Yeah, like that's basically what I am. What I do have. Like obviously, I drive. I'm a college student. Like I it technically is my decision. I'm 18. I can do what I want, but at the same time, like when I come home for a holiday or for like senior year, junior year of high school, when I was like pretty mature and basically understood everything and was able to drive, my mom has a lot of holidays at the house here, and she's like, yeah, like he's invited. My dad will show up. It's not like he stays the entire time, but hey, he's here. He comes, he leaves, and whenever my dad has something, my mom comes. They don't like overstay their welcome, but at the same time, they know they are welcome. So I think that's important.
Yeah. A lot of times divorced parents struggle about how to attend events together, especially when they're going through the divorce. It's like it's awkward. Maybe they'll both come, but they'll sit across the gym or across the theater or across the field or whatever from the other parent. And yet in your essay, you talk about your parents sitting together at soccer games and school functions. And how do you think that them managing at least a show of unity to show up for you as their parents, how do you think that impacted your athletic career and just you in general?
I think it's really important because like I'm big on all the mental health stuff, and like for me, like if I like looked over and I saw my parents like sitting on opposite sides of each other, when I'm like, let's say like I make a good save, I'm a goalie. Like if I make a really good save, and I'm like, looking over my parents, seeing them happy, but I only see one of them, for example. I don't know what the other one is like. Oh, that kind of sucks. Or but if I see both of them, cheering me on at the same time, I'm like, wow, like that really makes me feel good. And like, doesn't even make me like in the moment think they're divorced. Like it makes me feel like, wow, like that's my family right there, like proud of me. I don't even have to like think of something negative when it's supposed to be a positive moment. So for me, that's something that really helped me out and just was like another example.
I never really thought about this, but I can imagine if they're sitting in separate places, you might have to worry about who to look at first.
Yeah, like that's just another thought that doesn't need to happen. Like if they could just sit next to each other like they did, I wouldn't even have to think about that.
And what about in terms of academically? Do you think that their cooperative parenting has helped you academically?
100% because I don't have to have that worry about like when I'm trying to worry about like a math test or a paper that's due. I could just put all my focus into that and not have to worry about like if I come home, am I going to be running into something or am I going to have a problem? Am I going to have to deal with something? Never has really happened in my life. My family's been really good to me and good to each other, and we haven't really had any problems with that. I'm pretty grateful for that.
So, Joe, let me ask you this. I mean, I just was thinking about the logistics of it. I'm not the child of divorce, but I am a divorced parent. And one of the things that I always was worried about for my kids was having the right book, having the laptop, having the homework or the cleats or the costume or whatever. How did your parents handle that so that it minimized stress for you?
They would talk to each other. They were open line communication. There was never a time where like you had each other blocked or had like any like crazy like restrictions with each other. If let's say like I asked for something or my brother asked for something or they had, like were looking for clothes for us, let's say for a holiday, they would talk to each other. They would never really do something without making sure the other parent was okay with it if it had something to do with me or my brother.
You've done a lot of volunteer work, especially with TOP soccer and Best Buddies, and you've shown a real strong commitment, Joe, to helping others. And I'm also wondering if your experience with your parents divorced has influenced your desire to support others who are facing their own challenges.
Yeah, I think the combination of having divorced parents and my little brother also he has autism, so that's another thing that I have. So I with those two combined, I feel like it's not like I look at it negatively, but I think I've been through a lot. So having that and kind of understanding, how upsetting it could be sometimes, and the mental strength that you need to get through that. I like to help other people go through that stuff, and especially on like the special ed spectrum with top soccer, that's something I do with that. And then with Best Buddies, that's another thing that I do. I think I mentioned those. Those are two things that I really like to do because it doesn't take a lot of time out of my life, and it makes these kids really happy. And I know that it can be really stressful for some of these kids. And when I could get an hour, hour and a half of their time and make them happy for that, first of all, that makes me happy, makes me feel better, and especially makes them feel happy because it could be an hour and a half of my time, but that could be the best hour, hour and a half of their week. So it's something that's kind of how I look at it in their perspective.
Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce related topics so everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Joe Zweben, who's a scholarship winner for the Divorced and Single Family Scholarship that Miller Law offers. And we're talking about his parents' successful divorce and how they work together to parent Joe and his brother successfully. And I'm wondering, as I'm listening to you talk, Joe, about what your parents divorce did for you. One of the things that I often talk to clients about is that if they do a good job in the divorce process, right, that through the divorce process, they teach their kids that you don't necessarily need to white knuckle it through a marriage that doesn't work for your kids, right? And that you actually have the opportunity to teach your children successful conflict resolution, successful ways of managing difficult situations and challenges in your life. And it sounds like your parents did a really good job doing that for you. And also the value of helping. of getting through things and being able to help other people do that. Do you think that's right?
I think that's correct. Yes. I think
Yeah.
what they've been able to do, like I was saying before, just make it easier for us. Obviously, divorce is not an easy topic or an easy situation, but I think how they handle it is something that I'm very grateful for looking back on it because now I'd say it happened over 10 years ago now, definitely. And just from 10 years ago to now, like kind of how I've matured and dealt with it, like it's just something that, like whenever I say like, oh yeah, like my parents are worse, they're like, oh, I'm like sorry. I'm like, yeah, it's like it doesn't really for me. It's not like a sensitive topic. Like for me, it's just something that is part of my life. It's been part of my life, and they've made it very easy for me. It's not something I'm like, yeah, like it's really hard because they don't make it hard at all. And I think that's something how it should be more often with a lot of other kids.
It sounds like you learned a lot of emotional intelligence from watching them co-parent.
Yeah, they emotionally, it's definitely helped me grow and get like stronger, I'd say, from I was a pretty emotional little kid back then, dealing with a lot of stuff, and then from there to now, like from understanding how to help myself, I think I'm also able to help other people, and that's something that I'm trying to do.
What do you think? Your parents sound like really great people.
Thank you.
And a lot of great people, or people who want to be great people, really do struggle with these issues, Joe. And what do you think sets your parents aside? What would you say is like the one thing about your mom and the one thing about your dad, if you can say one or two things that really made this work for them and that other people could learn from?
Communication was definitely number one. Just not hiding anything and being open lines to each other. Because if you're gonna hide stuff and not be honest with each other, it's never gonna work. And I'd say maturity would be another one. Just communication and maturity. They were both pretty mature throughout the entire process of from when I was little up until today. There's never any like immature problems. Like they deal with everything head on. No hiding, like I was saying. If there's a problem with me or my brother, they deal with it together. It's not like one of them's trying to one up each other, like I've seen with other divorced parents. They're very good with each other and very and help me and my brother out a lot.
You mentioned that your parents put their personal feelings aside for your well-being. And so it sounds like what you're talking about here, right? That they have a commitment, each of them, separately and together, to show up for you and your brother. And that
100%. Yeah.
right, and that whatever happens in their personal life, they're able to prioritize their commitment to being parents to something that might be temporarily annoying or even not temporarily annoying, like really hurtful. But that is because, decision to divorce, that's a serious decision. That's hard to do. I say from personal and professional experience. And to say, well, we're going to do this, but we're still going to be the best parents we can be. That
Yeah.
that that takes a lot. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think like I was saying, it takes a lot of emotional strength for and just now they were able to go through that. Obviously, it's a very hard time for them because parents who have had two kids, been married for I don't even know how long they were married, but I know it was a decent amount of time. They've been together for a while and to go through that while also having to deal with how your kids are going to react, how the other partner might react. Because at the time they didn't know how each other were going to react. It was so fresh for them, and they were obviously both upset, not probably in the most stable mindset. So it was a lot of factors going into this, and it all turned out very positive. Like I keep coming back to, so I think that's very important. Like I'm not going to say like they're perfect prime, like amazing, like picture perfect parents, but at the same time, they really are in my eyes. Like they really helped me do everything I can while also dealing with their own personal problems, but not having their personal problems affect how they parent and co-parent my brother and I. So I think that's very important, and that's what other parents should try and do for their own kids.
One thing that your essay does is to challenge the social stigma around divorce. And since you have excelled academically and athletically, what do you say to people who assume that children of divorce are at a disadvantage?
I'd say in a way I could see why they would think that with all the negative like stigma, like we were saying, around divorce, like parents are going to be there for you. There are going to be problems. There's going to be physical and emotional battles that you go through. But if your parents could really work together and work with the children that they have and just have that open line of communication between everyone and be honest with each other. It really doesn't have to be horrible, horrible thing. Like obviously divorce isn't a good thing. You want to have your parents be together. That's why they got married, all this stuff. You made vows, but at the same time, like, stuff happens. And everything happens for a reason is what I try and look at. And you got to make the most of your situation. If your parents and yourself are just gonna look at the negative side only and just keep making it worse for yourself, then it's never gonna get better. But like for me, like I'm not gonna be like, oh, I really hope my parents get back together. It's not gonna happen. So that's gotta make the most out of what you have with both of your parents and go from there, really.
So you must have friends whose parents are divorced as well.
Yeah.
And when they talk about their situation, how do you think yours can, I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's more than one person, Joe, so, but how do you think, do you sometimes think, wow, I'm really glad my parents did the way they did it? Or what do you think are some of the things that your friends might wish their parents did that your parents did do?
Basically exactly what you said. Like I'm like, well, I'm really happy that they took the route that they did and didn't make it really hard for me. And I keep going back to this, but having to make myself make a decision because that I feel like, especially when I was younger, like now, I can make my own decision, like we're saying, even though, I don't want to, because that would still be an awkward thing for me. Like, whose house am I going to go to, for example? But back then, it was magnified. Like I was really nervous, and they didn't really had to make me make choices, make decisions. They were always there for each other, and like throughout the process, some of my friends would be like, "Yeah, they were really bad to each other. Like they couldn't be with each other." Even talking about restraining orders, I'm like, "Wow, that's crazy." My parents had nothing to do with that stuff, and I almost feel bad. Like, I try to talk to them about it because I feel like sometimes this is the only time if I mention it or they mention it, it's the only time they really openly expressed about it. So I try to be there for them, but it's just reflecting on a situation like that compared to my parents. It's just like two different worlds. So it, like I'm always grateful for how they handled everything.
Listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Subscribe to the podcast and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And today I'm talking with Joseph Zweben. He's a Pace University student, and he is the winner of the Child of Divorce Single Parent Household Scholarship sponsored by the Miller Law Group, and we're talking about the success of his parents' divorce. And I think that one of the things that, as I listen to you and I talk about how your parents come together, one of the things that parents who are divorcing worry about a lot is how to handle the holidays, family celebrations, birthdays, and things like that. And how did your parents handle that?
They handle it very well. They have me and my brother at one place, and they have the other parent come over. They know they're invited. Like if they don't come, that's their fault. But they've never done that before. They have each other knowing they're welcomely invited to each other's households, having a family discussion. Like they don't stay there the entire time because obviously, divorced for a reason. But at the same time, they stay there more than enough time for me and my brother to feel like, I don't want to say a real family, but to make it seem like I guess a real family, have all of us together for a holidays. Like, let's say it's Christmas, for example. My mom always has Christmas. My dad comes over, we have breakfast, we open the gifts together, we have fun. Then he leaves. That's how it goes for us, and that's all I really need. My dad's there, still opening presents with us like it was 10 years ago. Nothing's ever changed. That's something that I feel like is very important, especially for my brother, as he's a little different. Like I was saying, he's on the spectrum, so he processes things differently than I do. So for him having, that family sense right there on a big holiday for him, I think is really important for his mental health and just his well-being. And it makes me feel good that, no one's stressed out at Christmas. No one should be upset on Christmas. Stuff like that, I think is very important.
Do you think if they were bickering or fighting about stuff, what that would mean? I know it didn't happen, but if it did happen, how would that feel?
And that make me feel horrible. Like I was saying, Christmas is supposed to be a time where everyone's supposed to be happy, or just any family gathering. You're not supposed to have a bad time and argue. You're supposed to hang out with your family because those moments are something that a lot of people like don't like. They take advantage of. They don't really cherish, but that stuff's really important. And when you're gonna like, let's say at a dinner table, like you're gonna have your mom and your dad argue at the dinner table. Like no one's trying to have that. Like that makes you feel horrible. Like you're just trying to have a good dinner. Who knows what you went through that day, and then you have to deal with your parents arguing. Like the parents sometimes I feel like don't understand what the kid is going through as well and doesn't understand their mental health and their perspective of it. And like at least for at least the bare minimum, I feel like argue when it's just them and not when they're around the children because the children's perspective on it just it goes on a downward spiral once they see all the arguing and altercations right in front of them.
I think that parents know that. I think that something you said a few minutes ago about maturity,
Yeah.
right? Like that when that feeling of being disrespect or disregarded or somehow insulted comes up, it feels like in the moment, like you really need to defend yourself, even though your kids are there. And I think that's really hard for parents sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
A few years when you're talking about Christmas, you said, I think you said something like, it for a few minutes there, it seems like we're a real family. But you are a real family. Like to you, your parents are your family, right? Like even if they're not
Yeah,
married to each
yeah.
other then. Yeah. And so I mean, has that helped you sort of think about what family means?
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a time where I've lost the sense of unity in our family. Like, there's never been a time where I'm like, yeah, my mom isn't really there. My dad isn't really there. I've never had to deal with that. And that's something I feel like not a lot of divorced kids can say, unfortunately, because that's just not how it's been with a lot of things I've seen and heard. But like I said, in my example, we've always been a pretty close-knit family and have like we still have, like our family group chat with my mom, my dad, my brother, and me. Like that wouldn't be a common thing, let's say, for two parents that are divorced for like over 10 years now, I'd say. Like, but it's we're very close family still. And like I was saying a couple minutes ago, they make like if there's a decision about me and my brother, none of them make it without talking to the other parent. And I think that's really important.
How does that impact your sense of family? What divorce is sometimes referred to as making a broken family. And it doesn't sound to me like you think your family's broken at all.
I don't think we're broken. I think it got bent a little bit when the divorce happened because obviously it's not perfect. But I wouldn't say it's broken. We're like I was saying, we're talk about everything with each other. We're very close with family. We have everything that we need still. It's just two different houses, as I say it. I don't really have a problem with it. I see my parents whenever I want to, whenever I can come home from school or back in the past years. Like it's not more than a 10-minute drive to go to see each other's houses. Like they make it very easy for me and my brother to see them basically whenever we want.
I can imagine that in the 10 years since your parents divorced, one or both of them might have repartnered. Is that something that's happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how has that been for you, introducing new people into your lives?
Something that they don't really do that unless they really think it's someone that could be there for the future, I would say. So I think that's important. And at the same time, it's nothing that's really came up a lot, maybe once or twice in the past 10 years, because like and it's that sense of maturity. They're just not having anyone come into the house, meeting the kids. Because at least for me, that would have an effect on me, especially if they were there for a while and then just disappear. You get that sense of attachment, but it's never really happened. And at least to the factor that would happen. And for me, like I was saying, like a lot of other families that I've seen where unfortunately that has happened a lot, and then they take it to the next level, or have or kids or get married. That hasn't happened to me, so I don't know what that would feel like or how to deal with that because I haven't had that yet. But I know that my friends have had that, and I know that it's difficult for them. Let's say they move in, for example, like they have a new stepmom or a new stepdad, like that's a whole nother area that I haven't had to deal with. And having another brother, let's say like a stepbrother or a stepsister, that's something that they haven't done. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad or a good thing, but that's just something I haven't had to deal with. But it's definitely something that would affect my mindset. And I would have to, think about that. Because let's say my dad or mom had a kid right now and I'm 18, like having an 18-year difference would be a big thing for me, for example, and I wouldn't even be a part of the kid's life so much because I'm in college and then I'll get a job, an internship. So that's just something that I think they also put into perspective and wouldn't really want to do to me at this point in their lives. And some other parents and people that I've seen have done that. So that's just something that I feel like is another part of their maturity.
So, Joe, as we reach the end of our time together, if you could say something, and you are saying something right now to divorced parents out there in the world, what piece of advice would you give them about being a great parent even while getting divorced?
I would say even though it's a very, very hard time for you, like yourself and your partner and what you're going through, you need to still put your kids first, I would say, and understand their perspective because you are more mature than your kid at this time, and they they're gonna think it's their fault. Like that's gonna be their first thing. They're gonna think it's their fault. They're gonna think that they could have done something better to avoid this, and you need to reassure and keep telling them that it is not their fault. You know, nothing that they could have done would have stopped this. It's just how it's gonna happen. But you have to know that mom and dad, they're gonna be there for each other still. Like there's not gonna even though it may not be true, let's say at the time you can't have your kid be so upset and think about that because it's just gonna make them feel really bad about themselves. And that's something that my parents did. It made me feel good about myself and reassured me that it wasn't my fault. I didn't have, I couldn't do anything. They were there for each other still throughout the process. And I think keep going back to them. They were really mature, were able to communicate with each other and reassure myself that, family was still going to be fine. They were right. 10 years, 15 years later, I don't know how many years it was, but, still really good now. And I'm really grateful and proud of that. My family has dealt with it like that.
Joe Zweben, first of all, congratulations on winning the scholarship. Good luck in school and keep
Thank
in
you.
touch. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show.
Thank you.